Hey, my name is Matt Cromwell, and I'm here today with a few guys who know a whole lot about freemium WordPress plugins. And we're here today to talk about specifically the subject of freemium plugins with WordPress and how that space is changing and evolving, specifically in light of a comment that was made by Matt Mullenweg this weekend at the State of the Word. It's actually not a new comment. He's actually had this position for a long time in a couple different places. But it is a changing and evolving space, so we wanted to talk about it. Basically, down here, at least in my bottom left, you see Postmatic. His name's Jason Lemieux. He actually asked a question to Matt Mullenweg. Can we do the Brady Bunch thing? This guy right here. He actually asked Matt a question regarding the possibility of policy changes at WordPress.org to allow for maybe advertising of premium plugins on WordPress.org, or even potentially the idea that a premium marketplace might evolve at some point or another. And Matt made some very interesting and maybe a little bit controversial comments about premium plugins and the freemium model specifically. Each of us are funding our lives by the freemium model in one way or another, so that's an important subject. So we wanted to talk about that and flesh that out a little bit. So I'll start with me to do introductions, and then there's three elements that we'll talk about of Matt's response. So I'm Matt Cromwell. I work at WordPress.com. We built the Give donation plugin, quick checkout Woo extension, and several other great plugins that I'm sure you'll enjoy if you just go and buy them right now. That would make me happy. And I also am an admin of the Advanced WordPress Facebook group, and generally like hanging out with guys like this. So Adam Warner, you're right here. You're next.
All right, I'm Adam Warner. I am the co-founder and lead handshaker for FooPlugins.com. We create Foo plugins focused on media. We have the free Foo Gallery plugin, the free FooBox plugin, and then pro versions of FooBox and several other plugins that we have. You can find me at FooPlugins.com or at SucceedWithWP.com.
Jason Lemieux.
All right, I'm Jason Lemieux. I'm from Vermont. I make Postmatic, which is an engagement platform more than anything, but we're best known for, I think, being the only blogging technology which allows for 100% email-based commenting. So if you're looking for increases in engagement and commenting on your site, then check out us. We're at gopostmatic.com. And you can find me on Twitter at
Jason Coleman.
At GoPostmatic.
Yeah, I'm Jason Coleman. I'm the founder and lead developer of Paid Memberships Pro, which is a membership plugin for WordPress. And we've had a freemium model for a while now.
Nice. Okay, this is great. So if you haven't watched the State of the Word already, then I'll actually let Jason from Postmatic actually summarize his question again for us real quickly, if you can, in 2 sentences or less.
Sure. So I was looking during the keynote at the. All right, you want
do
2
your
sentences.
Best.
So, given the dramatic changes in WordPress with the advent of the REST API and 4.4, as well as combined with a 25% global share of all websites, the plugin landscape is changing dramatically from being plugins to maybe more like applications. And those cost a lot of money and take a lot of resources to develop and support. So given that, are there any perceived changes or proposed changes to WordPress.org to enable better business tools and changes of the policy to welcome freemium plugins to be
exactly
without having to jump through a lot of hoops?
And Matt's response immediately was no.
Not much.
Yeah, not much. And then you also clarified, but also what's your general take on place for freemium plugins in general? I thought it was a well-worded question with a great context. Right. If everyone watching, I just added a link in the chat on the side here That's to the State of the Word video itself. And yes, Jason Coleman, thanks. It starts at 1:30, 1 hour and 30 minutes in, and you can see it there. And I'm just going to summarize based on what I said, and I collaborated with these guys earlier about basically 3 elements that Matt Mullenweg responded with concerns with freemium plugins on the repo or the freemium model in general. And those 3 elements are basically that freemium plugins specifically can provide the user with a bad experience. The second one is that he said that monetizing the plugin directory could create division within the WordPress community in general. And he gave Joomla as kind of like a cautionary tale example. And then the third one would be that he really believes the plugin directory is a place to celebrate and encourage open source collaboration. And he didn't say it explicitly, but it seemed to have the suggestion that premium plugins don't embrace that philosophy as strongly as purely free plugins would. So that's the format of this talk, is basically walking through those 3 elements of Matt's concerns or objections. So I actually, before we jump into those 3, one thing I wanted to do, which I actually haven't actually asked Jason this. Jason Lemieux, were you basically, what was your first initial reaction to Matt's reply to your question?
It wasn't surprise. I've heard, I heard the Matt Report podcast that he pretty much answered the question the same way. I thought it was worth asking again in the context of the space that we were in and with such a larger audience. That's why I did it.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'll open it up generally. So the first thing that Matt raised is that the freemium plugins, which I think some people had some averse reactions to his response right away, because you basically asked about premium plugins, and his first response out of the box was about freemium plugins. So there was a little bit of a disconnect. But let's open that up. What do you think of his comment that freemium plugins in general can provide a bad user experience?
Well, I don't think that's a correct statement across the board. It generalizes things, and as you guys know, developing plugins for free or for profit, the bottom line is you want users to use your plugins for one reason or another. So the thinking that freemium provides a bad user experience out of the box, I don't think is correct. At least I don't agree with that. I agree it certainly can happen and does happen, but I don't think it's fair to lump them all in together.
Right. It can apply to free plugins as well. I mean, it goes without saying that there's plenty of free plugins that offer a bad user experience because they're underfunded and abandoned. And that's probably really, really common in the repo. The user experience that Matt was more specifically talking about, I would guess, would be the upsell and the experience of the actual plugin not being what was advertised unless you pay some money. And I can understand that for sure. But I think that the statement that freemium plugins provide a bad user experience is a little...
I'd say the same, of course, in that free. I think what Matt was talking about, he said something about feeling nickel and dimed when you use a freemium plugin, and that's definitely possible, and it's something that we struggle with on our plugin and other plugins that have kind of an add-on system or like an upsell system. Is any feature or piece of code we have to figure out if it is meant to be in the core plugin or an add-on. I think it's interesting to note, and it's often noted, that Automattic, where Matt's CEO, has like 3 of the top 10 freemium style plugins. And even one of them, Akismet, is bundled into WordPress. And so like these kind of things have been hashed before of like, oh, maybe, Akismet should be taken out because there's, a commercial entity behind it. And kind of, it does enough good that it's worth being in there. But, similar arguments could be made of Jetpack and now WooCommerce, which is owned by Automattic, and is, one of the biggest WordPress plugins. So I think in general, as a plugin author, a commercial plugin author, I feel like Automattic and Matt are like our allies in this against repository. Like we have similar goals. Like we want, he has a lot more influence, obviously, from the history of what goes on, but we have the same goals in terms of being able to have a sustainable freemium business model that is done in a good way within the WordPress community.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's probably well worth saying that I, for one, am so thankful that freemium plugins are even allowed in the repo in the first place. And I think the team has done a really great job of defining guidelines for how you advertise your upsells, making sure it's not overly spammy, overly riddled with ads, that sort of thing. So I just want to say thanks to the whole team there at .org that allow that and that help filter out and give us some guidelines on how to do the upsells. And what Jason said about picking what things go into your core free plugin and what things are sold as extensions or add-ons it's tough. And you have to ride the line between providing enough value and usability to make it something that people want, to get good reviews, make it just usable, but then also making enough revenue to support all the time spent providing free plugins and the add-ons. It's tough. It's a balance, but I think eventually we'll get there. I don't know if that's going to be a premium marketplace. I doubt it, but maybe, or just more guidelines on freemium. Who knows?
I mean, the idea. One thing that Matt mentioned was like he mentioned, like sometimes you'll have a plugin that's like a light version of the pro version, and that was what he called out specifically. And actually, if I look at around our, I guess I'll call it our room, our Brady Bunch square here, we each have kind of like a different take on the freemium model. I mean, just in our company, we have a couple different freemium models within our company, So I think it's important just to remember also just that when you say freemium, it actually means a lot of different things. Postmatic, for example, is a free plugin that has a paid service connected to it, right? Am I understanding that correctly? Yeah, exactly. And there's also there's Foobox Free, which does something specific, and Foobox Pro, which does something additionally to Foobox Free. Same thing. Give has the add-on model. Jason, help me remember exactly the paid memberships pro model. I think I have it confused with somebody else in my mind.
We used to, up until this summer, it was all code was free, and we charged for support.
Exactly,
now,
that's what I was thinking.
Right. This summer, we have some of our add-ons now are premium. So if you get them through our site, at least, they're open source. You can find them on GitHub. But if you get them through our site, we charge for automatic upgrades of them and stuff like that.
Exactly. And honestly, like in my mind, when Matt was saying something along the lines of businesses will think of ways to deal with this, he said that towards the very end of the response. I was thinking of that model that you suggested of basically like the plugin itself is totally free, but if you're going to want documentation or if you're going to want support, that's going to cost you, because that is a lot of times a large portion of the cost to the company is providing the support. How are we going to be able to actually fund the time spent on providing support? So in the freemium space, the one that's always really interesting to me is the model that you've been championing, really, is charging for that support. Can you speak generally to that approach that you've been taking? Is that I mean, obviously it seems to be going well from all appearances on the outside. Does that go well?
Yeah, like charging for support. I believe so. And it's definitely a good model for people who kind of have a plugin and they're worried about the responsibility of kind of building up any other kind of infrastructure that's needed, or, how do I create a second plugin on top of my first? And we basically said, just put the whole plugin out there, and then figure out what the right price is for answering questions in our paid support form and set that price. So we were able to develop Paid Memberships Pro and kind of get market share because it was, free in the repository and really strong plugin. But actually, as we grew and as we kind of have more demands to maintain, like right now, the core plugin is large, and then there's 80 add-ons for it. And so the maintenance task of keeping all those things running require more cash flow than like the support pricing that we did actually just supported the support. And we were, doing the development of the plugin pro bono, kind of like it was almost volunteer. Like that wasn't really calculated into the price. So now the Plus membership that we released this summer, which actually does charge for, like we created a system to update our Plus add-ons and some other features around the community and stuff for it. But basically it's just giving us more revenue. We can use that to hire like the developers that are needed to maintain this plugin that's this large. So I think it's been good. And we were able to build the plugin. I think it's definitely good for kind of smaller side project style plugins for sure. At least in our case, we felt kind of the need there was a few different ways we could have done it, but we needed like more revenue stream to kind of continue the operations and keep growing the plugin.
Yep. I'll say, just to wrap this subject up on my end, the thing that I actually really like about the freemium model is I like WordPress folks really like to encourage that 80-20 rule. Like if a feature is necessary or good for 80% of your users, like it should maybe perhaps be an option there, or it should be there in one way or another. And I think the freemium model really benefits that rule in general. The core plugin itself should serve 80% of the users really well, and the next 20% of the users who need more than the core plugin have the ability to basically add on additional features in one way or another, whether that's a pro version of the plugin itself or an add-on model idea as well. And I think that that's really actually perfectly suited to the repo in this way, in my opinion. So cool. So the next one that Matt mentioned was this cautionary tale of what happened with the division within Joomla. And honestly, I'm not really all that informed on the whole controversy that happened within Joomla. But the examples that he gave specifically were that monetization of their marketplace itself just created a lot of antagonism and animosity within the community. And everybody who's in WordPress knows how important the WordPress community actually is. So if this is a really important and valid concern, which I think it is a valid concern, but being so important, how is that relevant to us as freemium model authors? And are we jeopardizing that in any way with monetization, basically? So what's your take on it? Postmatic, let's hear from you.
Yeah, I'm not very well versed in what happened with Joomla either. So I can take some guesses maybe as to what maybe did happen. I think that I wouldn't necessarily advocate opening up the repo as it stands to full commercialization and commercial plugins. And maybe Joomla did so a little willy-nilly, and I could see how that would lead to an unfair marketplace and lots of bad behavior. I think that there's a middle ground here between a fully commercial WordPress.org marketplace and some accommodations for people making a living. So I can understand how it definitely would happen knowing humans, but I don't think that, I think that.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I don't think I want to see a commercial section of the plugin repo as it is now. And I really don't think it'll ever happen, but you're right. I think when you say there needs to be some kind of a middle ground, take Envato, for example. People put stuff on Code Canyon and Theme Forest, plugins, Code Canyon. But developers, I would say in our community, aren't really keen on doing that as their pricing model stands now. So it seems like a really large opportunity for the foundation maybe, or .org or whoever, to create that marketplace that we've all been yearning for, and to do it in a way that adheres to the values that Matt always discusses and that I think we all believe in too. But I don't know the exact answer, but every time I think about it, I think it just needs to happen because I think it's inevitable. Someone's going to come in, create a marketplace for premium or freemium plugins, and they're going to succeed. However it's done. That's my gut anyway.
Right. And sorry, and to just respond to that, I asked that question because I am concerned. Like, I don't want to see the repo become a graveyard in 2 years. With the complexity of plugins and the opportunities that we have as developers, it's a plugin repository, right? Plugins are cute. It's like, oh, you make your excerpt 2 sentences longer than it was meant to be. Yeah, that's a plugin, right? Like, we're building applications, and if WordPress is moving away from a blog and away from a CMS into an application platform, you can't host applications on the .org repo. It's just not going to happen. And so the repo, I think is at risk there unless we figure something out.
I don't want to go away from the discussion of like a premium version or an app marketplace. But in general, like I thought Matt was going on autopilot a little bit to focus on that part of it. Because I thought the way that Jason phrased the question was like something like, what kind of tools can we add to the .org repository to encourage premium commercial plugin owners to, to use the repository as it is or new? Like it kind of wasn't specifically about marketplaces. And when Matt said not much immediately, I thought like that's like, you're kind of not getting creative enough. And actually I can't go into details, but at the community summit earlier in the week, there was discussion at the summit with lots of commercial plugin authors and other people in the community kind of about that topic of how can we support commercial plugins in the repository and also all plugins. And a lot of the things that we talked about, additions to the plugin repository, and I'll just speak personally from like my own opinion now, not on behalf of the summit. But there's things we do for commercial plugins also helps small plugins.
Yep.
So for instance, like my struggles with the repository a lot have to do with like the review system and the support system and how, being a large complex commercial plugin where not all the code is in the repository and kind of attracts 1-star negative reviews that we have to deal with. And I feel like I'm incentivized to, try to, people game the reviews, but we don't game the reviews, but like I have to worry about the reviews every day because I want my, search placement in the repository to be strong. Also on the support side, like we have our own paid support that's offsite, and I just have a sticky note in the .org repository that nobody reads telling them how to do that. So are there ways that we can improve? Like if you say, hey, I have a better experience for people with my plugin to get support off here, it may or may not be paid. Like I want, are there ways that we can kind of more officially point to that through the .org? Because there's a set of expectations in the way things are organized that we should be providing support like in the forums. And is that really the case? Like maybe we should, offer options. So we talked about that and like many things. There's like so much that can be done to kind of improve like in the core plugin and .org to make it easier for me that's not creating a marketplace. And so those ideas need to be talked about and surfaced. And figured out and kind of worked on.
Yep. I think two
things
about that. Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead,
Two
Matt.
things about that. One in particular, like it's ironic that this weekend, right before WordCamp US started, GoDaddy actually announced a big plugin partnership program. They released it on the Thursday before. And they have this big list of 100 most popular WordPress plugins that are on GoDaddy sites. And they're reaching out to these authors to basically say, hey, we're a hosting platform. We need you to help make our WordPress sites better. Like, let's work together. So that's probably a really creative way that a host is providing that kind of support. Like what you're saying, supporting premium plugins doesn't mean making a marketplace. It could mean lots of things. That's what I hear you saying, Jason.
Right.
And the second thing I forgot.
Yeah, that's just go ahead. Oh, okay. Just to add to that what you were talking about, the .org, it really comes down to tools that are available on .org for plugin authors, right? So perhaps there's deeper analytics. Perhaps there's some kind of a support system that isn't just the forum that exists now. Perhaps it's something that can be more integrated into your own site, your plugin itself. There's lots of other tools out there that do that. So I'd be interesting to see if any of that comes to light. One other thing I just wanted to bring up, and I don't want to derail, so just talk about something else if it's doesn't matter. But with the API framework now in, and people starting to develop more, as Jason said, applications rather than simple plugins, do you think in the future that there'll be more opportunity or even a repository for something like applications instead of plugins? Or do you think they'll still be just called plugins?
It's getting to be a pretty gray.
Yeah, I think one thing
right now.
Matt said this either during the State of the Word or in one of the questions that, maybe the future of WordPress.org's download is here's the server software, which is more like what we have now, and here's the front end software, which might be an application similar to how Calypso integrates with WordPress.com. Mm-hmm. And so I think if you, offer, a front end for integrating with WordPress, there's these apps that we're talking about really are kind of different versions of a front end. So it might make sense. I don't know if there's been a lot of thought, by other people about this, but it might make sense to, have like apps, quote unquote, or, kind of front end applications featured.
An app repository.
Yeah, because it really is, we kind of understand what plugins are and how they integrate. We understand what themes are. And they have some themes in the repository that are like React based or JavaScript framework based. And they're pretty clearly a theme. And I could imagine how I could add JavaScript front end stuff to my plugin, but in reality, like it's almost a different beast, in apps. Like we have to, it has a different set of expectations on what it does and how it's used and stuff like that. Maybe it becomes another silo.
Just want to remind folks who are watching right now, you can ask questions. They'll be public over here and we can answer them in a little bit. If you just do /Q and then type in your question, it'll show up over here and we can try to get to those at the very end if anybody's got questions. Cool. All right. So the last issue that Matt kind of touched on is it's a little bit difficult to parse the way that he brought it up. He basically brought up the subject of open source collaboration in his response at the very end. The way that everybody should go and listen to exactly the way he words it, but because it's a little bit hard to parse in the context of the question that he was answering. But what it seemed to suggest is basically that premium plugins, while they might be licensed with GPL, are basically not publicly hosted. Like, for example, most of us, if we have a premium add-on or a premium plugin, we're going to put that in a private GitHub repo because we don't want it just openly spread and shared around everywhere. We kind of gate the access to that with payment, which all of that is perfectly legal and right within GPL. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Generally, the way people say that premium plugins are valuable is because of the support that they offer and the automatic updates, things like that is what you're paying for, while the code itself is free. So Matt's response seemed to be suggesting basically that premium plugins don't fully embrace the spirit of open source. That's kind of how I parsed it. I might have parsed it wrong, but I'd love to hear what your guys' thoughts on, is it a valid concern to say that charging for premium plugins basically diminishes the spirit of open source?
Well, I can get behind that a little bit, and this is Jason of 7 years ago talking. But I remember when I came across my first premium plugin that used this model, which was Gravity Forms. At the time, there was not a very good forms builder for WordPress, and Gravity came out, and it was wonderful even at 1.0. But you had to buy it to get the source, and I was appalled back then. And coming from obviously my mind has shifted quite a lot since then. But at that point, in my use of open source software and development of it, it seemed appalling to me. And and I remember I think I had a back and forth of like, hey, I don't want to buy this, give me the code. And I think they did. But I was like, it's GPL, I want the code, And if a user asks that of me now, well, actually Postmatic we're a little
Exactly.
different than probably the model that all of you guys have. We're a service, and our core plugin is our only code, and it is GPL and in the repo. But our servers, which are Rails servers, all of that code is not GPL.
Yep.
That's ours, and that's what makes everything tick. But anyway, that I was appalled when I first came across it, and I understand where he's coming from, and I think that maybe to a degree, having your premium plugins not necessarily available on GitHub maybe squanders open source development a little bit, but if somebody wanted the code, they could just ask, and I'm sure you'd give it to them too. I don't know. Like anybody that truly wanted to tinker with your stuff, you're going to let them tinker.
I mean, I think
not,
any friction that you remove from collaboration, results in a better product. And even so, when the WordPress core started thinking of feature plugins, many of which are hosted on GitHub instead of, updates to core that are hosted on the old SVN repository, the commits to those feature plugins on GitHub are getting, I don't know what the numbers are, but just so many more people involved because developers now, work in Git and GitHub, and it's kind of been designed to facilitate collaboration better. So even something like that, like it's both open source, but the tooling is better, makes things easier. So definitely if you have your stuff on GitHub, but it's only available to developers who kind of ask you to get into the private repository, there's going to be a developer who finds a bug in your code and goes, it's too much hassle to like send them an email and try to get it. Whereas if it's open, you get pull requests, out of the blue that kind of improve your software. And I think there's been many plugins with kind of like an add-on model or like some of the code is premium model that they on their website, just as how we do it now, we charge for the plugin from our website, but on GitHub, it's completely open. It's a public repository. And we'd have to find these stats, but I've seen people writing blog posts saying like it hasn't affected sales. They're like, we were really worried about making our plugins public because technically it allows someone to circumvent, paying for access to the code. But it isn't actually hindering sales, and it's improving development. And with Paid Memberships Pro, we came at it kind of from the backwards angle where all our code used to be free, and then we started charging for them on our site. And like, why would people buy code on our site when they could kind of figure out how to get it for free on GitHub? But people still buy the code on the site, and they buy it because they want to support your team. They want to get it from the source. They want automatic updates, and they want all these kind of non-code things that we bundle it up in. So kind of to that end, I think like the original, like what Matt's talking about this, that, the more open you are, the more collaboration it encourages. And even, I forget if it was during this question or some other time when he's talking about APIs that are closed, and like even APIs should be opened up, and that's going to help. I'm really curious what they do with WooCommerce as they talk about it next year and kind of the roadmap for what they do, because WooCommerce now, I believe, is mostly like, the core plugin is in the repository for free, but the extensions, while developed on GitHub, are in private repositories. And so kind of slightly less open. And I feel like that's not common to what other stuff that Automattic does. And like, I'm curious, there's a lot of money involved. There's also a lot of developers involved, which makes a lot of these things complicated even for us. Is like, I can make a choice to put, my Pay Memberships Pro add-ons out for free, but if someone else provides an add-on for us, a third party, like what power do I have to make a decision for him? Kind of how open he wants to make his code. So WooCommerce has the same kind of decisions to make about, what they're going to do with their extensions.
Yep. Adam, got anything?
Not really. I mean, you guys have said it all. I don't have anything to add to that.
One thing I wanted to throw out there to complement what Jason Coleman was saying is others have experimented with making the premium code totally public as well. Pippin has affiliate WP is totally public, and it's on GitHub, and on the README it just says really clearly that if you need any help with this at all, then please make sure to buy a license. Like, he just makes that really clear. Also, Nick Haskins' Lasso, he changed the name to something else. I forget what the new name is, but used to be called Lasso, the front-end editor. That one's on GitHub, totally public, and he says it a little bit more explicitly. He says, if you're actually using this on a website publicly that's live, please buy a license. And those are ways that people are being completely open and transparent with the code, and still charging a premium for the support and just supporting the business in general. So it does happen. But I mean, when I saw those things go public the first time, I was like, I wonder how that's going to go for them. Like that's a tough call to make. But I think it's a brave call, and I understand it. I sympathize a lot.
I guess if there's time, like as devil's advocate, because this isn't necessarily how I feel, but I've had conversations over the weekend with a lot of people. I think kind of one of the arguments against going as open as possible is that there are some plugins or some code that isn't going to be developed unless the business investing in it can expect to get a return on their investment. And so having a very simple pay for a license to gain access to code you can't usually get is like a really easy way to get paid for code that you build. And like if that's taken away from our companies, we all have to get a little creative about how we get paid. And is it possible that, like we're losing certain kinds of plugins? And I think like Jay's original question was about like, as there's more apps and kind of enterprise and other existing business that gets involved in WordPress, like those guys kind of, are they going to choose not to make certain applications or certain, plugins because they don't have as much control over what happens to the code? And I think, in my opinion, I think open source kind of always wins in a lot of these fights. And so I'm not as concerned about that. Like if there's an app that like business decides not to build, like, that's okay. Like, they find another way to build it, and it kind of doesn't affect like the general world. But that is like the other side of the argument that I heard from people. So I wanted to put it out there,
Yeah.
Matt, how long are we going to go on this?
We're flexible. I know that Adam actually has to run pretty quickly. You need to run too, Jason?
I'm okay.
I don't know. No, and I've got a lot of.
we got all kinds of more material. We can go for a long time, I'm sure. I want to respect everybody's time. I know that Adam does need to go, and there was just a couple other small things I wanted to follow up on that I've been writing down along the way as well. Adam, I would love to give you the last word for now.
Well, I guess my last word is I'm still positive for the future. I'm really, really positive for the future of WordPress, the community, the .org repo. And I'm just really curious to see how all this stuff pans out. And we're going to do what we can to be part of that and experimenting on ways that we can be open and freely share everything that we make while still earning enough revenue to make it happen. That's really what it boils down to. That time equals money, and money puts food on the table for my family and those of our team. And we need to figure out how to do that.
Cool.
That's all.
Appreciate it, Adam. We'll let you go.
All right. Bye, guys. Thanks.
All right. Bye, Adam. Thank you.
Let's see. One other thought I was working on. I actually, in prep for this, I did listen to the interview that Matt Medeiros did on the Matt Report with Matt Mullenweg. Too many Matts there. Matt Mullenweg actually made a comparison or brought up an example of WP Rocket, for example. WP Rocket earlier this year put out a transparency report saying that they had made $30,000 a month, or they were trending at $30,000 a month. And whether that was actually gross or net, I'm not totally sure. I don't think that was actually perfectly clear. I could be wrong, but Matt said, "Wow, that's amazing! Like a plugin shop is doing a really great job and definitely making a great business off of it. But how many sites are they serving? If you look at the stats, it's 1% of the entire WordPress ecosphere. So when you start to look at basically users are trying to choose how they're going to build their website." And if they see that they're going to have to buy this plugin here to do this one functionality of the website, and this plugin here, and this plugin here, and this plugin here, the cost of their WordPress website can really go up exponentially. Whereas if they just do that simple math comparison to like a Wix or a Weebly, then the math starts to get really bad for WordPress. That was the one thing that he said in his interview with Matt. And I think the irony of that for me was that Matt Mullenweg, I think at that point, was not the owner of WooCommerce, but then he became the owner of WooCommerce, and that criticism is really endemic to WooCommerce. That it's a free plugin, but you actually end up, if you want to build the kind of store that you really want, many people end up spending several $100s a year in order to have that access and that code. So, I mean, there's in a lot of ways, I sympathize with the criticism or the concern that premium plugins increase the cost of a WordPress site. But I don't know. What do you guys take on that? I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of comparing apples and oranges to compare a nickel and dimed WordPress site to a Squarespace site. It's kind of two different things, two different levels of ownership, two different levels of customization and possibilities. And I don't really see it applying, to be honest. And sure, by the time you put together the WordPress site that you might need, you might be in the hole for $1,000 a year of licenses max, right? Like that's like you could buy a lot of plugins for $1,000, but that would be a really nice website. You would get a lot more value than $1,000 a year out of that website. I mean, that would be an enterprise level, beautiful. Like I'm from an agency background, and we used to build out very, very expensive WordPress-based websites for large nonprofit organizations, and $1,000 a year is a drop in the bucket. It's like, and they wouldn't be able to get anything close to that.
Yeah, I have a couple opinions or ideas around this. One is that WordPress.com as like a really friendly user application, and also like the core WordPress that's really user-friendly kind of sets this expectation that everything is easy and free and quick. And if you're using plugins, some of them are just plug and play, and some of them require a lot of thought and a lot of money and a lot of, thinking, and sometimes a lot of development time. So that's just kind of a side comment that like there's these expectations kind of trickle down. And when you start using plugins, you have to change your expectations, and it's hard. That's about it that we have as a business, is to kind of like make sure people understand what they're getting into as they build their websites. Kind of to the last point that Jay was making around $1,000 a year gets you a lot of really good value. I would agree. And I think especially in kind of the Western world, first world market that we kind of live in and we work in, and most of our customers we interact with are in. But definitely over last week, as I had a lot of conversations with people from around the world at WordCamp US, and also, ideas around like the value of democratizing publishing through WordPress, and people were bringing up good points around accessibility, that we have to make sure that like our apps and our websites are accessible to people with disabilities and kind of vision impairment and stuff. But it also came up the idea that like money is an accessibility issue. That if I have to pay $300 for a premium plugin, I don't have access to it. And so I thought of it in the sense of like, is it fair that this code can only be used by people in the Western world to make, tens of thousands of dollars a year on their e-commerce websites? Or, someone in, and actually there were some talks at WordCamp US about accessibility, talked about, I forget the country in particular, but these parts of the world that, they're very poor, but everyone still has a mobile phone. And so they have access to some, technology, but not necessarily bandwidth. And so like people in the third world, they should be able to run a WordPress website that's e-commerce to make hundreds of dollars a year. And, like I've been thinking more about like on the software side, like how can we kind of, provide service to those guys? It's a really tough issue, because how do you sell something cheaper to some people that is more expensive for others? Right.
Because it's being developed in the West.
I know that
rates.
Other businesses like Microsoft, has different prices for different countries and stuff, and it's a trouble. So it's just something I thought about, that it is getting really expensive, even for people that we work with in some ways. And then I think the feedback is valid, that you're getting a lot of value out of these plugins, and so you have to make a business decision. Some people really are just kind of whining about having to pay for business, and you're like,
Yeah.
But I think there's kind of a larger point. Like if we're making the core software available to everyone in the world, is there some kind of way we could make the premium software available to them as well? Because if not, someone in one of, the programmers in Eastern Europe, aren't making as much money as us, but they're in a lot just as smart as us, just as driven as us, and kind of, they're going to compete,
Yep. I have two small things. I know Jay has several points you want to bring up. I just have two small things I wanted to add, and then I that's all my notes. You guys have expended me. So basically, there was the point about whether or not premium plugins encourage collaboration or not. I don't want to bring all the attention to me in my question that I asked at the State of the Word, but like I brought up the issue of whether or not WordPress is going to be moving all the way to GitHub or not, or to Git in general. To me, the biggest impediment to collaboration with WordPress right now isn't whether it's a premium plugin or not, but the fact that we're still on SVN. It's just, you can access all the code really well, but can you actually, say, hey, I made improvements to your code and where should I put it now? I don't have access to put it anywhere. I don't have the permissions to push to your repo. So if we want to encourage collaboration and support premium authors in the way like Jason was saying earlier, that there are other more creative ways, getting us on Git is one of the best ways to promote plugin development, whether free or premium, a lot more. And then related to that, basically, on one side, Matt was saying that he wants to encourage collaboration, but he also said in his response to Jason that basically he doesn't think plugins should be a one-man shop. I thought that was a really powerful.
It's Mika's question.
Oh, that was Tamika's question.
Yeah, she brought up the point that, when you have to program back-end PHP and front-end JavaScript, it takes more effort, and plugin authors. And also about the release schedule, that there's 3 major releases every year or 4, and that we kind of have to, it's really hard on us to keep up, which is true.
We got to keep up.
Yeah.
And in order to be a 2-man shop minimum, 2-person shop minimum, that requires money. The minute you say this plugin is not going to be a one worker, one developer plugin, it's going to be a 2-developer plugin. That's money. That's somebody's salary immediately, in one way or another, and that requires money. That requires income. I'm sure there's lots of creative ways to monetize free plugins that we, even in this room, like I said, all of us represent different ways of monetizing free plugins, basically. And there's probably even more creative ways to do it, besides what we're doing just here. But nevertheless, the monetization of code has to happen in one way or another. So,
I think so to what you're talking about, I think definitely, Git, as we talked about, is going to make development easier, and we're moving in that direction. For having around collaboration, and if plugins get more complicated, and you need kind of more people to work on certain things, I think that is true, and that's kind of the case with how fast things are moving. One of the other things going on is that tools are getting better. So kind of tools, if we do move to Git, it makes it a little easier to build. So maybe it's okay that I have to do, JavaScript and PHP code at the same time, or I have to, account for more core updates. So hopefully tools keep up with the demand of what we have to build, and that'll kind of ebb and wave. But I also think if there's some motivation to collaborate, if this is really hard and we have to collaborate, I worry that we lose that solo developer who just in the middle of the night drinking 3 liters of Coke, bangs something out. And there's a lot of amazing stuff that comes from that. But I also think it might encourage developers to work together, even if they're not, not for pay, but together. I think of, I've told this story before. When I first met Pippin Williams from EDD, he had written Restrict Content Pro, and I had written Paid Memberships Pro, kind of without knowledge of each other for over a year. And then we were, saying, isn't this thing you have to do that's really terrible? How did you do this? Oh, I did it this way. And we're like, yeah, that makes sense. And all that stuff. And we're like, God, why didn't we just, if we met a year ago, we would have, figured out how to work on this together. So that's kind of a timing issue. But also I imagine that some of these plugins that are man, I can't do it on my own. And there's another, if there's other plugin developers doing the same thing and they can't do it on their own, are they going to be a little bit more encouraged to work together? And maybe that'll result in kind of a better product, or at least
Yep.
counteract what's happening. That it's harder to get things done.
Yep. I mean, if we talk about like generosity and collaboration in WordPress, like Pippin Williamson is one of the most collaborative and generous people I've ever met. Like, and
Sure.
and he's also an icon
Can I
of the
give him
freemium
props?
model.
He's not here.
I tried to get him on. He was booked. He was going to be here, but he told me he'd love to, but he was booked. But he's also an icon of the freemium model, just like WooCommerce is. EDD is definitely like one of the bastions of the freemium model. And the reason why he can be collaborative and the reason why he can be generous with his time is because he's self-sufficient. He has a thriving business off of his code, basically. So yeah. Jay, I want to get to your questions, your comments.
Cool. Well, I was just going to ask a general question of why did you guys decide to go freemium or premium with your plugins to begin with? Why didn't you just keep everything in the repo? What'd you do it for?
I can answer. I know that when
Jason will start.
When we thought to build Pay Memberships Pro, we had clients who kind of needed a membership site. And at the time, the other plugins, I didn't think they were great and good for my clients. I wanted to build something better. But there also were some closed plugins like Wishlist Member and Magic Member that were really big already in the market. They had a lot of money. They were spending a lot on AdSense. And so one of the motivations was definitely that, if we make our code if we put it in the repository, it'll be more available to people. So when I was thinking about it as a business, I was like, I'm going to go for market share and give it away for free and try to get market share. That was kind of, like a selfish business decision. But, at that time, also, and over time, it's grown that I like our goal with the plugin is really to make it just like WordPress is, like the de facto application platform for blogs and CMS. Like we wanted Pay Memberships Pro to be de facto application platform for membership sites. And so, open source always wins, from what, we're seeing. Like Pay Memberships Pro has to be as open as possible. And kind of, as long as I can build a product that meets those goals and is open and should be your first choice for memberships, I should be able to build a business on top of it.
Yep.
I think of Mullenweg, building in the early days, WordPress.org and kind of being able to build a business on top of it, that kind of thing.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So then you created your extensions.
Yeah. And actually originally for many years, as we built add-ons, it was really, all of our add-ons were free. And the only reason we would put something in an add-on versus kind of the core plugin was like an 80-20 rule. Like this is a feature that, and really just like kind of developer focused. Like me as a developer, I'd rather have this in an add-on so I can customize it some way or something like that. Yeah.
In the early days there,
no,
Jason,
we kind of
the donation model.
We avoided the donation model because we had a price on support. So lots of people want to donate for support. And like, there is a price that was $97 a year. Like that's the price and not whatever price they wanted to pay. So we probably lost out, and some people were just like, hey, I want to donate for whatever. But if people asked me, I was like, if you want to donate, you should buy the $97 membership that supports us. Or if you don't want to pay that, like, tweet about Pay Memberships Pro, write a review, do something kind of non-financial to result. I feel like because we did have a business model around the plugin, if we accepted donations, we were kind of like circumventing the business model that we had.
Mm-hmm.
Right. What about you, Matt? Did you ever take the donation?
This last year, this is just me personally, not WordImpress, but this last year I created a child theme for 2015. I called it Matt 2015, and I actually didn't put it on the repo. I just did it because I wanted to get to know the default theme better and then release it. It's the one I use it on my own website, and I put it on a page and started taking donations. I can say, I got maybe $100 of donations for the whole year, but I also didn't do any major advertising for it or anything. Mm-hmm. But for WordImpress, we never did the donation model. I do know for a fact that actually one developer, I won't say numbers. I think I know the number, but I won't speak for him. But Chris Wigman did the donation model with Better WP Security, actually. And he actually did really, really well with that. Not at the beginning. It took a while. But by the time he was ready to find a buyer for Better WP Security, he had actual solid donation numbers that he could reference to help value his plugin. And I mean, that's a security plugin. That's not a not a widget or whatever. That's a kind of plugin that every single WordPress site needs in one way or another. It's so
right.
That to me, in some ways, if every plugin decided to really encourage the donations on the repo right now, I still think very few of them would get the numbers that he was getting. I think that's an exception to the rule rather than a norm. But it just definitely shows that it can work. It can absolutely be beneficial. But yeah, we do have one question over here on the side from a good guy I know named Kevin Hoffman. In a recent discussion of GPL clubs and those like it, some developers claim that these gray markets were their only option because of price of premium plugins. I won't read the whole thing. Jason Coleman, you actually brought this up earlier, that basically the monetization of premium plugins makes it basically an accessibility issue for those in other countries whose currencies are like $1 is 10,000 rupees or whatnot. So why don't you go ahead and speak to that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my thinking on this is really fresh because I've only started thinking about it like last week as things have come up. But I definitely believe that more towards like we're building software solutions, we should have like for the world, like we should think about, building that solution for the world. And then even as a business, like, are we missing a business opportunity by not thinking about, smaller economies? So I'll call them. And also, like, I kind of made the point around the competition can come out of a smaller economy. So we have to, kind of stay on top of things. Another point related to this is kind of the idea that, like, around WooCommerce, there's these GPL clubs basically to get to code for free. And I think a problem that happens there is that when someone downloads, a WooCommerce extension from there, the brand of WooCommerce is getting diminished, and that person downloading the extension is kind of angry that they have to, they have a lot of anger towards like the people who actually built the code. Like they should be happy for them. And if they get, malware because they're downloading from a really shady site, they're going to be mad. I'm like, oh, WooCommerce made me get malware because they won't just give it to me for free. Which, as someone like I get similar sentiment for some of the stuff we do, that people are like angry, like we're making all this stuff and you can get it for free. Like we're doing a lot of work, like, and you expect it for free. Like, how do we handle those expectations? But at the same time, it's like a brand issue where on our end, like I think like a lot of the way towards supporting third world, like all of our code is available for free and somewhere on GitHub or the WordPress.org repository. So if you can use Paid Memberships Pro without the support, without the update service, without our webinars and some of our documentation, then you can get the code for free and kind of hire cheaper support within your economy and that kind of thing. So I feel like that's kind of a responsibility we have to making that software available. And also it'll help our brand in that people who get that software for free, they still feel grateful to us that they're able to use it, instead of kind of being fighting us. Because it's almost like I call it the physics of economics, and that like if it's possible for your code to be available for free, and in a digital world, like you can copy and paste this code, like people will want it for free, kind of rightly or wrongly. Like people are just going to tend to try to get things as cheaply as possible. And so you can't just kind of like put up a wall and say, I'm not going to worry about it. This is the price. And because people will keep trying. And it's similar to the music industry that, MP3s are so easily copyable. It's if you put up a wall and say like, you have to pay me for this digital thing, like you're fighting the tide, and you might be upset about it. You might say like, I wish I could make as much money as I used to selling CDs. I wish it was different, or, that artists need to make more money in order to make good art. And those are all open questions I think that are worth thinking about, but the reality is that you're fighting against the tide of people who kind of want to get your stuff for free. So kind of, I feel like if I can build my business that doesn't fight against that and just kind of like incorporates it somehow, like it's going to be good for me.
Yep. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. If not my bank account, my blood pressure.
Cool. Jay, did you have another point?
Cool. It's broad, but I was thinking about the different models that we're all using in our businesses and that different businesses use in the WordPress ecosystem. so the donation model being one, which, I know has been tried a lot. And in my personal talks with other plugin developers, hasn't proven to be very successful at all. And I always think back to this story about there was an early WordPress developer that made just a ton of contributions to core and to plugins that are still to this day kind of essential plugins used on hundreds of thousands of sites. And, and he was a young guy, and he really poured himself into WordPress and into making contributions for a long time. And I met him just by asking him to customize a plugin, and I sort of hired him to customize some stuff that he was working on for us years ago. And he's left the WordPress scene now. He got burnt out on it. And this is like a brilliant programmer, probably one of the best programmers WordPress. And he's left. He walked away. He cut all ties, and he's done, abandoned his plugins and pulled out. And I ran into him, and we had a long conversation. And it did boil down to money for him. He was like, I poured my life into this for a long time, and I was using the donation model for my plugins, and and I asked about it, and he was like, I was like, how much did you ever get in donations? I was assuming hundreds of thousands of dollars, given how common this guy's code was. And he was like, $120.
Yeah.
Ever. Right? Like 9 essential plugins and millions of downloads, and he made $120. And he's like, what am I going to do? And I have to deal with all these substandard tools for offering support to thousands of people who are just mad at me all the time. Mm-hmm. And he just had, as a developer anyway, he had such a horrible experience with the repo that we've lost him. The community's lost him. He's gone. He's moved on to really interesting other things, and he's developing very smart things for very smart people. And he got sucked into the commercial sector and is, he's gone. And I don't know. I always think back to him, and I'm like, how do we not lose these brilliant people? Like, how can we make an ecosystem that supports people's livelihoods, so that the ingenuity stays within the WordPress community? Because increasingly, as plugins become apps and WordPress becomes a platform, the ingenuity is going to be in the commercial sector, because it's going to take a lot of money to develop things. It takes us a lot of money to develop Postmatic, and and I would consider Give a plugin. I consider that more of an app, and the same with what you're doing, Jason. Like, these things, as you all both know, cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to develop and maintain. And how are we going to keep that skill, that talent, and that sense of sharing in the repo if it's really difficult and you have to jump through a lot of hoops to make money at it? Mm-hmm. So anyway, I have questions, but that's my thinking most of the time. It's like, how are we not going to let the repo become kind of a graveyard of uninteresting low-level plugins, while all the real novel and interesting work in WordPress is happening somewhere else, and in a fragmented community that doesn't have the same sense of sharing and giving back that we always have?
That sounds like the real question you wanted to ask Matt right there.
Kind of, yeah. It
sounds like the instigation and motivation for your question that was much more polite.
Yeah, it is. And if you let me blab for a minute more, there's some smart people in the chat here. If you let me blab some more, I could talk about the model that we took with WordPress and why some of the conversations that I've had with some of the org mods have kind of really left me sad. Is, we've been in the WordPress world since the beginning, and as an agency. And when we made Postmatic, we really wanted to make a huge contribution to WordPress. And we saw an opportunity that, in the case of comment notifications and commenting in general, it's all been suffering for a long time from the beginning, and that we had some technology that could solve a lot of those problems. And so we figured, we made a business choice we did the math, and we realized, like, we could probably increase our cost of development by 20 to 25% and offer Postmatic in the repo. Or we could save ourselves 25% development cost and just stick this thing on our own site and put it on Code Canyon. But then we would be not making this contribution to WordPress. So we made a conscious decision to spend, a lot of money to give this back to WordPress. We're like, comment notifications have stunk for a long time. They're one way. Email's not a one-way protocol. Email is about two ways conversation. So let's give all of WordPress, let's let it be the only blogging platform that has full email commenting available, two-way. Get a notification, you reply, send back your thing. That's our whole deal. and this needs to be in WordPress. It needs to have been done right 10 years ago. Let's just do it. So we made a decision to go ahead and spend the extra 25% on our product to give back to the WordPress community and enable better conversations for everybody in the world globally. On our nickel, it was a hard decision to make, and at the end of the day, we have to jump through a lot of hoops to keep our code in the repo. Every feature that we develop, same as you guys, you have to figure out, like, can we fit this in the core plugin, or do we need to build this out? In our case, not as an extension, because we don't have a free versus premium version of our plugin. It's just a plugin. So do we build it in the plugin, or does this need to be built in Rails and live on our Rails app as our service side of our thing? And frankly, it's increasingly expensive to keep building things in our Rails app and keep the plugin as just a service layer. We're committed. We want to give back. We want to do the right thing, but we also are trying to make a living. And it's really hard to get kind of like slapped around all the time.
Yeah,
and how many businesses would be would be lucky enough to be able to make that same decision? I think about it every day. Like, how long can we stay in the repo?
Yeah. I kind of, like a similar situation with us that's motivated a lot of my discussion this week with people about these topics is, in the support forums on WordPress.org, there's kind of an expectation that we support it. People, the more it's in the UI where it shows how many threads you've responded to. And people give you 1-star reviews to get your attention because you're not, getting back to them within a couple hours on the .org repository. So for us to kind of maintain that, even at our level, and if we want to maintain it more, it would cost, thousands of dollars a month. Also kind of, it hurts our brand to have these kind of negative things out there. And I've seen other plugin authors where the reviews are about, their extensions, which are paid. And so it's like this plugin isn't even like, you're not even talking about the right plugin, stuff like that. So there's these frustrations in using the system that are, for me, kind of as a business, do I spend money to stay in there? And there definitely is a lead gen through the .org repository. I think it's always going to be simplest for users to click add plugin and then search for a keyword and kind of find a plugin and add it. And also getting updates. When I update WordPress to 4.4 this evening or tomorrow morning, I'm going to get the PayMasters Pro update at the same time, right, to the same service, and it's going to be good. So that experience is always going to be good for the user. But me as a business, do I want to stay in a repository? And we thought about, kind of pulling out a repository similar to what you had to do. And I think some people might say good riddance, we're losing it. But in reality, there's 40,000 plus people using PayMemberships Pro, and only 4,000 of them are customers on our other site. So there's tens of thousands of people who are kind of using our plugin for free, and they get to use this thing and do something really awesome with WordPress because that code is available. And yeah. I want those people to be able to use the plugin for free. We want that to happen. So they're really going to lose out if we do. And so I thought about my own case, and definitely, just like you're saying, Jay, that you were able to make the decision to put it in, but I mean, so many young developers who are kind of starting out, and they have an idea and they want to build something, and they're making the decision not to put it into their .org repository. They're making the decision to make things kind of more closed, because they feel like they that's going to help them finance it. And so we definitely, I think there's things we can do to make the tools better, right? So it's just frustration of why does it cost so much to use the .org, or why is the .org kind of set up to imply that everything is free and that if anything has to be paid for, it's bad, or the kind of train, how can we kind of easily train users that they should have different expectations, or I mean, if as a community, we really have to decide, is the plugin repository, do these premium plugins have a place, or should we kind of scare the premium plugins like Jetpack and WooCommerce and PayMasters Pro right out of the repository, or should we try to support them?
I have a little bit of a different perspective on all of this. I think for me, I mean, I'm the support guy. I run all the support, and I do, especially with Give, I do all the support on the repo. And I actually talked in Las Vegas actually about that free support is gold for premium plugin authors. And I believe that. So for me, the value of the repo is specifically the exposure that you get, that you are contributing to the WordPress space. And for authors, like us, like Give and others, we don't actually have the external costs that you're incurring, Jay, because we don't have a hosted solution outside that the users are dependent on. But for the example of Give, and I think I actually talked with you about that specifically, Jay, this weekend. When it comes to donation solutions, there's a choice that informed nonprofit organizations have to make, and that's, are they going to go with a third-party solution, or are they going to go with a self-hosted solution? And basically, we try to not speak into that decision all that much at all. There's a lot of really good third-party solutions for donations out there that are great. But if they're going to go self-hosted, that's one of the big benefits of open source software, is that you can be a fully self-hosted solution with the tools and the code that you have at hand. And so if you're going to choose to own all of your own data on your website and not have that go somewhere else, then we're hoping that once you've made that decision, you're going to use Give, because we try to be the best solution out there right away. So for us, the repo is the opportunity for the user to gain that benefit of being a self-hosted solution. And Give out of the box is really robust. It's not like what Matt was saying. We don't have Give Lite. We have Give, and so the support that I do on the repo is expensive because it takes a lot of my time. But it's funded basically by our premium sales. And I do the Give support, the free Give support, on purpose, because we're providing a product specifically right there that we want to make sure that users understand that when they commit to doing donations in this way, that they're going to be supported. So to me, those are the big benefits of the repo. Not every plugin is like Give, though. Some plugins have different kinds of costs that come with them for the developers, like Postmatic and others. But I think that's one thing with the self-hosted aspect. So,
Jay, can I ask because it's funny, people who were with me at a certain table in WordCamp Miami this year will know that we kind of napkin designed your business there, because we're talking about ways to do replying the comments by email, which I'd done for a couple of clients before, and we kind of realized it's really built into the mail server, is so critical to doing that it has to live on a server and it'd have to be a service. We figured out everything, and then we looked it up and like, someone's already doing it. It's called Postmatic. Awesome. so we never did it. But I know that there's technical kind of reasons that you would want to put some of that technology on a server. Like I don't know exactly how you do it, but it makes sense that some of the technologies on your own server you have full control over, and kind of make sure that the email that comes back gets read and stuff like that, and make it easier. But you kind of implied that there was also some features where you make like an economic decision to put it on your server instead of in the plugin. I just wonder, what is like one of those cases, so that to understand that decision. So there's fundamentally, regardless of if you're on the free plan or the premium plan, there are things that need to be on our server. So the plugin functions mostly as a service layer. You get an API key, and the simplest for anybody running Postmatic is the comments need to come back in. The emails need to come back into somewhere. They have to get processed. Signatures have to get stripped out. Quotes and line stuff has to get all stripped out, packaged nicely as what would actually the proper comment be, and then we publish that back to your site over our API. So that happens for anybody. But there's on the premium plan, there's lots of things that we do for our premium users that that we would like to include in the plugin, but I forget which repo guideline. I think it's like number 16 or something. Keeps you from having any unexecuted code sleeping in your plugin that's only activated if somebody's on the right kind of a plan. Right. So anything that is a premium part of our service that is going to be executed only for some users who are paying users all has to live on our Rails server. So an example would be if you're on premium. If you're on the free plan, when we send a comment notification, it's pretty much on par with what you get for a comment notification from Jetpack or from Subscribe to Comments Reloaded. It's pretty simple HTML, pretty simple text-based email. If this person left a comment, here it is. Right.
The premium plan, though, you get a much more beautiful HTML email that has gravitars, and it has, you know, an overview of the post, and it has other comments and some sort of contextual information about where in the conversation did this comment happen. Because you might get a comment notification that for a comment that you left 6 months ago on some site somewhere. So in the email, you get everything you need to know about what's going on. So that HTML-based email is only available on our premium plan. So all of the templates for that have to live on our server. The inliner that inlines that HTML email before it goes out the door to Mailgun lives on our server. So all of that stuff sort of has to live on our server instead of just being sent from your local install. Hits our API, gets compiled on our server, and then is sent out to Mailgun. So so lots of functionality like that all has to live. We have to build it as a Rails server instead of in the plugin.
So
which is kind of a loss. Or sorry, go on.
Oh yeah, I feel like in some ways it makes sense to go there, but it'd definitely be easier for you if you could put it just in the core in the plugin.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah. So there's all kinds of things. So that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, it's tough. We all probably deal with these things like that.
Yeah. So every time we want to add a feature, you know, to the premium plan, we have to add that. We have to modify the API. We have to make the API carry whatever's going to be needed for that feature, and we have to build the functionality in Rails instead of in PHP. And we're PHP developers. We'd like to stay in PHP.
Yeah.
So it just gets complicated, more expensive.
Is it possible to, I might have missed some of the nuance, but is it possible to do like a pro version of Postmatic that would have all those triggers in it? You know, so that basically the free one can stay free, and you wouldn't have to adjust that so much, or you wouldn't have to make those changes in Rails, but you could, you know, say like, if you want to be on the pro plan, here's the pro plugin, and any of those changes could happen in the pro plugin rather than in Rails. I don't know.
Yeah, it would be possible, but this speaks back to a larger user experience thing actually that I wanted to bring up, because we're all interested in user experience.
I'll just say this is the last thing we're going to bring up.
Okay. Sorry. So Matt had talked about, you know, that he wants people to have a good user experience actually in his response to my question. And for us, the loophole that we all have used, that you guys use now and I've used previously, of having a free plugin in the repo, which you then would maybe buy the premium version of the plugin, and having to juggle downloading this new premium version and then installing that onto my site. And do I leave the core plugin active, or do I need to disable it? Do I run them both at the same time? And this whole thing about a user having to leave the WordPress dashboard, you know, hit another site, download some code, re-upload it. I've never seen that executed well in WordPress. I think that's a horrible user experience of the upgrade process from premium to pro. There's no standardized way to do it. Everybody does it a little differently. It's always confusing. And I'm sorry, no offense, I hate it. And so when we built Postmatic, I was like, I refuse. We're not doing it. We're just going to have one plugin, and you get an API key, and you're done. So we wanted to make a user experience that was, you stay in WordPress to do this. Yeah. And so that was our decision that we made. We probably could have pulled it off with a second plugin, but I don't want to make users jump through hoops to do that stuff.
Yeah. Actually, the one example, no, it makes a lot of sense. And, you know, you just basically ruined my whole business, but that's okay.
No, you don't want to go my way. Keep doing what you're doing. Don't come my way.
Totally kidding. In terms of like the upgrade process of a plugin that's done it really well and really nicely, is actually Foo Gallery. They do a really good job, actually. Foo Gallery has a section where they have all of they're really add-ons, actually. It's not really going from free to pro, but they have a really great panel of their extensions that you're not actually buying it directly in there, of course, because you can't, but they do have a good way to make it happen pretty well. As far as how those things go in general, they do a really good job. The other one is, I don't know if you met Vova this weekend, Jay. Did you? Yeah, I mean, Vova is doing stuff that nobody else is doing that I think is really, really exciting, actually. And I mean, he does have a system set up where you can actually purchase add-ons directly in the WordPress admin, basically. And I don't know if you've seen that demo or not, but you should definitely check it out. Vova Feldman, he's from freemius.com, if you guys want to check that out.
He's going to be he's going to be really interesting to watch what happens with Freemius after watching the demo. I will be surprised if he doesn't get blowback from .org or if we don't get blowback from .org for running it, essentially.
It's
but
all
we'll see
op-
what happens.
Yeah,
it's all legit, you know.
Yeah, I know. And definitely, if the blowback comes, I know that it's kind of less the business model and more like, and it looks like Freemius is doing things in a good way in terms of making it clear to users, like the data that's getting sent back. Yep. And so I think as long as they're doing that correctly, that's not really like the blowback you'll get. I think it's actually something kind of more mundane from some talks I had in terms of when you have the same code that's loaded in a bunch of different plugins, it becomes a hassle when different plugins update that library at different times. So we run into this with like the Stripe API that we have to make sure that, you know, we load our own version of the Stripe API, or we check, you know, we check if it's already installed. And so when those Stripe versions get out of date, you know, one or the other plugin will break. And so the same thing with like Freemius is really kind of meant to be a library that's included with a bunch of plugins. And so that's a challenge that has to be figured out. But it might, you know, but definitely what it does is, I've seen that demo too, is pretty cool. And a lot of stuff that plugin authors kind of want in their business.
Yeah. I was mostly referring to the monetization area that he's doing about, he's loading an entire iframe in WP admin for like purchasing extensions and stuff. And that gets into one of the gray areas about local code versus remote code. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Just one other quick point. We don't need to get into a whole conversation about it, but something that we keep bouncing around here is, has there ever been any talk about opening up the plugin search API to be able to search alternative repositories? Because that would solve a lot of things. Because I think a lot of people are in the repo just for the sake of the exposure and marketing. And
there's actually a couple alternative repos, but I think it could be done a lot better if there was an actual like live API, but there's a couple alternative repos out there that are like repo scrapers basically, and they do a good job of providing more robust search and filtering than the repo does itself. The latest one that I like is actually on managewp.org, not the .com, but the .org one actually has some really great statistics on there that I think are really robust.
But what about letting everyday users search those alternative repos right from WP admin?
Yeah, no, that's a totally different issue.
You know?
That's funny. I'll be looking into this soon, actually. We have kind of on our list, and maybe it's against rules of the repository, but like for our users, a lot of users will search for an add-on just in the plugin space, and it doesn't come up. So I was going to try to investigate a way to kind of intercept that filter and say, hey, are you looking for this add-on? You know, when it matches a search. And that's just because the user experience comes back. The feedback is they can't find it, and you're like, oh, because it's somewhere else. But if that's against the rules, we won't be doing that. If it's not against the rules, I'll be developing an example for how to do it.
It gives me a really interesting idea.
When I start to have like support tickets, like I'm searching for your Give add-ons, and all I get is paid memberships pro stuff. What's the deal?
Yeah, exactly. There's so much room for abuse. But
okay, let me just wrap up.
Okay.
Yeah, no, let me wrap up with just acknowledging the other questions that are here. Alex says, what theme are you talking about? We're not talking about any themes at all today, Alex. Emmanuel says, and actually Jason addressed this in the comments, so official certification program might help in general. Whoa. Cool. And then last one, CJ Cross says, if a developer uses your plugin as a part of their theme or website, would it make sense to give the developer a commission when someone purchases the theme and then upgrades to the premium version of your plugin? Oh, I'm not sure. I just want to give a head nod to that question. It kind of seems like an edge case scenario in some ways. Jason, do you have any, Coleman, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm trying to understand what he's really asking there. Use your plugin as part of your theme. Let's give it a commission when someone purchases the theme and then upgrades to a premium version.
Looks like affiliate stuff, maybe.
Yeah.
Or like ThemeForest themes, a lot of them are use GGM activation to install the free plugin, and maybe that user who installed that theme then upgrades to the pro version, and it's all because of the theme, basically.
Yeah, like I do know that so the entity that's made the most money off of Pay Memberships Pro is not necessarily us. There's a theme shop on ThemeForest that has themes that include Paid Memberships Pro, or kind of bundle it through the ThemeForce rules. And they definitely do a ton on top of it. It's not right. It's their themes, like, and they add a lot of value. But if you do the math on their sales, they've made, over $1 million in revenue. And so, I mean, it's fine. Like their themes are actually like, their quality, they do a lot and people are really buying the theme. And we have like and we get some people, use that theme and then come through our channel and get support from us and pay for our services as well.
Yeah.
So I guess, I don't know if that's the case he's talking about, but like that company already kind of makes money by being able to say, we support PayMasters Pro and you can do all these things. They kind of, our features become their features. But yeah, affiliates is, I mean, there's definitely people that we think about doing affiliates with. So
cool. All right, guys. Well, I really appreciate your time. It was absolutely my pleasure to meet both of you face to face for the first time this past weekend. That was excellent. And I really appreciate you both coming on today and providing some serious insights that are far beyond my expertise myself. So thank you so much. And thanks everybody for watching. I will be writing up a summary of everything here. It's going to be published on the wordimpress.com blog. And I'm sure that we'll be touching base some more. I'm hoping to see you guys in Miami, I think, right? Did I mention that to both of you? Are you both going to be in Miami?
I was there last year, but I think I'll miss it this year.
I think I'll miss it this year too.
Oh, man. All right. Well, San Diego. There's always San Diego.
That's on my list. We'll figure it out.
Cool. Thanks so much, guys.
See you guys.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much, Matt.
Yep. Bye.
Thanks, Justin. Bye-bye.
Bye.